yet bad. It will seem inappropriate or foolish or in some cases slightly illegal, but if you follow through the logic, you will find out that it is good, solid advice. The first piece of advice I would give is the how of how you do things. And this is where being a nerd, nerding your arse off, is an incredibly useful thing. You cannot be too obsessed with what it is you're going to do for a career. And you cannot research it enough, you cannot be obsessed about it enough. For instance, if you want to be a writer, you need to read as much as possible. You need to read all of your rivals, you need to read everybody whose job you would want to have, and then you need to start going back into the past and reading how people used to write before. Because if you're stealing from one person, if you have one inspiration, that's going to seem quite obvious. That's also plagiarism, and you can get sued for that. If you're stealing from 300 or 400 different people, that's genuine creativity and uniqueness. That is genius. Because the thing about curating something, if you're a fan of millions of things, no one else will ever have that collection of influences. It actually shows more about your personality than just being into one or two things. So go back and steal as much as you can from the past. When people lauded Bob Dylan for being a genius, it was simply that he'd gone back and stolen it all from Woody Guthrie. If you go back 20 or 30 years into the past, people forget about all that stuff and use something that, like, you're innovative, or in fact you're just ripping something off from a dead granddad. So that would be my first piece of advice, is steal as much as you can. When I first started being a columnist, the columnists that were around at the time all wrote in a kind of like 1980s and 1990s way, which is very good. But I went back and read columnists from the 19th century and the early 20th century, going back and reading Dorothy Parker and H.L. Mencken, and which allowed me to use 19th century words like bothersome and eschew, which gave me unique leverage in the marketplace. So that would be my first piece of advice. Be a cocktail. Don't just be one thing. Put in as many different influences as you can, and no one will ever know where you got it all from. You confuse them with multiplicity. The second thing is what. What are you going to, if you're a writer, or what you're going to do? What are you going to do? What is the purpose of your life? And I, for years, knew that I wanted to write books and films and TV shows, but I was like, well, I can't write. I don't know how to write those kind of stories. I don't have any stories in me, because to me, a story was a teenage boy who felt slightly alienated from his society, finding out how magic power, such as being bitten by a radioactive spider or discovering that he had the Force, and then going on a journey where he found a mentor and then destroyed the Death Star. And I was like, I don't have any stories like that. I don't have a classic archetype monomyth story, so I'm screwed. I've got no stories to write. And I had a sudden revelation when I was about 34 or 35, which was, these are all the stories that already exist. I've got nothing like that. I can't write that kind of story. And I just turned from here to, where are all the stories that don't exist? Where's all the stuff that's not being written at the moment? And when you put those glasses on and you stop thinking, I can't do what's being done, I can't copy what's being done now, I'm not capable of doing that. And you go, here's all the stuff that isn't being done. And I think particularly from women, or if you come from any kind of sort of underrepresented minority, it's very easy to just sit there and go, yeah, but they don't have stories like that yet. They don't have businesses like that. They don't have people like that. And whenever you're thinking that, there's nothing like that, there's nothing like I am, you have to add one word to the end of that sentence that changes everything. And you go, there aren't things like that yet. There aren't people like that yet. And you are that yet. That's what you do. You start writing a list of all the things that you can't see and making those happen. Because this is the other thing at school as well, and when you get most careers advice in the way that schools and education is built, they are looking at the job market as it is now and looking to fit you in there and give you an education that will fit into what exists currently. But you are the one that's going to invent the future. You are the yet. So bear this in mind when you're kind of getting this kind of advice, that people are only telling you what they know exists so far. If you've decided that your job is to create the future, you're going to have to go out and work out how to do that yourself and just go, I am the yet. That is what my job is here. 3, be aware of your fuel. It's being very angry is very useful. It's an enormous fuel, but never let it show in what you do. Again, a lot of the communicators I know and a lot of campaigners that I know and writers I know are doing it from revenge. Usually there was someone when they were 14 who would not get off with them, and that has burnt inside them, and now everything they do, and indeed their entire life, is one massive subtweet to the person at the age of 14 who would not get off with them. And that anger is a fabulous energy, but don't let it manifest in what you're doing. Use that as a fuel, but don't let that be your product. So, and this is particularly, again, if you're a communicator, and a lot of the young female writers that I know and activists write in anger. Understandably, they're writing about sexism, they're writing about racism, they're writing about trans issues, they're hurt about these things, they're scared. It's a horrible world out there that can seem very alien to you, and you have a lot of hurt inside you. But if you communicate the things that you are righteously angry about in anger, people will not hear what you are saying. They will not look at the words that you are writing. All they will do is they will hear the emotion and they will respond emotionally back at you. And you see this time and time again across social media, people arguing with each other, two sets of angry and hurt people arguing with each other, and it's just become emotional. And that's where humor is so important, because with the onset of a joke comes the relaxing of the buttocks. People go from rah to, we can talk about this a bit better now. So never communicate in anger. There is a thing, if you look at the language you use, again, this is particularly relevant for writers and people who want to broadcast and stuff, it's almost like neuro-linguistic programming. If you look at the language you use, if you're using attacking, fighting words, even if you're not writing something particularly angry, people will mark you down as a feisty person and they will argue back at you because you've set the template. Someone like Charlie Brooker, who I love. Charlie writes about things in a very despairing and very angry way. But that's not because he's nihilistic about the world. It's because he's a disappointed romantic. He's a disappointed optimist. He actually wants to make the world a better place. But so many of the people who read the stuff that he does and listen to the stuff that he does think that he's just an angry man who likes to swear. And whenever they communicate with him, even if they're fans, it's all just kind of like, you fucking asshat. And it's all shouty and sweary. That's all they see. So be aware of the words that you use are a trigger. They set you are the one that sets the tone when you are the first person to communicate. And make sure that you're communicating in such a way that you can take how people will react in kind back to you. The amount of people I know who will write a shouty, angry, sweary thing and then be surprised when people shout and swear back at them is quite extraordinary. If you can't handle a big argument, don't start one. Write them from a relaxed and humorous point of view, if you possibly can. 3, or maybe it's 4. I'm not very good at maths. I didn't go to school. Be lovely to everyone. This is very important. If you can learn hypocrisy at a very early age, you will do very well. Doesn't matter how much of an asshat you think someone is, just plaster on a smile and fake it till you make it. Because this is a very tiny world. Again, when you start out in this, you're kind of like, I'm meeting hundreds of people and they all look the same. They're all straight white men from public school. If I slag off one, I'll probably never meet him again. You'll meet him again. You will meet all of these fuckers again. None of them ever go away. They sit on chairs and they never fucking leave. So pretend to be lovely to them. You can slag them off later, behind their back, on closed Facebook groups or in the toilet with a friend, although always check under the stalls that there's not somewhere next door. I've been burnt that way many times. But it's important to remember just loveliness. The amount of people I know who aren't particularly good at their jobs, but people just go, they're just so lovely to have around. They're just a lovely person. People like to believe in lovely people. People love it when they meet someone who's lovely and go, that person is lovely. Because when you recognise someone's lovely, it makes you look lovely. Suddenly you're just in a big lovely circle. She's the kind of person who loves lovely people. She's lovely. We're all excited when we meet a lovely person. Be that lovely person. It's very, very important. Also, when you start at a job, it's very important to, people send, I get stories, I never go into the office at the Times, but I get stories about what happens there when we have interns in and people on work experience. An amazing story a couple of weeks ago. Someone came in for work experience and was talking to the columnist David Aronovich and was going, so you write columns for the Times, what else do you do? And David Aronovich said, yes, I also write a column for the Jewish Chronicle. And the intern said, Jewish Chronicle, that probably doesn't pay very well, does it? And David Aronovich said, why do you think that? And the intern said, well, they're Jewish, aren't they? They're quite tight. Not surprisingly, that intern was not invited back. That's a massive error. Never be anti-Semitic to someone with an obviously Jewish name would be a big 101 piece of advice there. I wouldn't do that. Similarly, someone I know who was working at a women's magazine got someone in as work experience and was alerted 3 hours into the work experience's first day by their social media team that the work experience was tweeting about how much she hated the magazine and how everybody who worked there was a stuck-up bitch and some of them didn't have shoes that fitted properly. And that last obviously being the worst thing you can say to someone who works for a women's magazine. And she also was fired. So, again, bitching behind someone's back is fine. Don't bitch on social media about your job. That's very, very important. There is no such thing as a secret bitching session on social media. Someone will screenshot that and they will ruin your life. Similarly, it's always just a good idea to just, again, not... I mean, I am a naturally bitchy person, but I've managed to breed most of it out of me. I spent years being horrible to bands and reviewing TV shows and sort of being a bit bitchy about it. Then I started trying to make TV shows and realised it's really, really hard. So I now take back everything I ever said. And I had stopped being a bitch about 4 years ago, but I took myself out of retirement during the Queen's anniversary Jubilee concert that was on TV a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember that. Some bands went and played to celebrate the Queen's 70th year on the throne. And Ed Sheeran popped up. And and it was during his first Rubbish album when he still wasn't that sexy. And as he started to play his guitar and sing his slightly maudlin, mewling song about homelessness, I just tweeted, "My God, if any of my children ever come home and tell me they like Ed Sheeran, I'll put them in a weighted sack and throw them in the canal." Just tweeted that out there, just got that off my chest. I had had a couple of drinks. 15 minutes later, presumably the minute he got off stage, I got a tweet from Ed Sheeran going, "I'm so sorry, Caitlin, I'm really upset to hear you do not like my music." I was just gutted. I just had never occurred to me that Ed Sheeran would check his Twitter feed and just see some moaning, hungover old woman in Crouch End just having a go at him. I felt absolutely awful. And of course, subsequently, he's become really fit, and the last album was really good, and he's best friends with Taylor Swift, so I've absolutely fucked my chances of being best friends with Taylor Swift. From one bitchy tweet, so let that be a lesson to you all there. If you have to, this is very practical and solid, this is the first practical and solid piece of advice I'll give you. If you have to make a difficult phone call, for instance to an accountant or someone that you're trying to get work experiences from, or your mother, put a bag of Maltesers on the table and every 10 seconds put one in your mouth. And suddenly the bad thing will be a good thing. You will start to associate making difficult phone calls with a good time in your head. You will stop feeling so unhappy about picking up that phone and talking to someone. You'll stop thinking about it in terms of an awkward conversation and start thinking in terms of calories and chocolate and pleasure, and you will become a more confident and outgoing person as a consequence. 7, in the kind of industries that I suspect you're trying to get into, kind of media stuff, a massive mistake that you can make early on, and one I myself made, is to believe that you have to be the most fascinating person in the world. This is a fatal, terrifying, exhausting thing. Constantly trying to walk into the room and say something completely legendary straight away. Always trying to be unusual and fascinating and astonishing. That is completely exhausting and almost impossible. And it also means that you spent too much time watching television and watching films, and that your role models are fast-talking broads in 1940s films rather than real-life people. People who are genuinely fascinating are absolutely exhausting to be around. Simply remember to be... And I was wholly under this illusion myself that I should be fascinating at all times at the age of 17. And then I met my husband, and he went, "It looks quite tiring being you at the moment. Why don't you just try being nice instead?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, is that an option? That's amazing. I didn't... Well, that's fucking easy. Anyone can be nice." And that was when I stopped drowning kittens and just became a pleasant person. This is a general piece of life advice here. 9 times out of 10, you're not having a nervous breakdown. You just need a cup of tea and a biscuit. It's very easy to confuse the two, particularly at around about 2:30 on a difficult day. You will genuinely be questioning everything in your life. This is it, this is the end of me, I must end. If someone brings you a cup of tea and a Kit Kat at that point, you're immediately better. So my big piece of advice is before you ever try diazepam or therapy, just buy a big biscuit tin and see how you go from there. That can often bail you out. 9, when things are going bad, particularly at the beginning of your career again, you can get overwhelmed by things. You say, am I ever going to make it? Who am I? What am I going to do? And the key thing to remember is that life divides into 2 categories. Things that are amazing at the time, great experiences, going out for a party, having some sex, getting a job, getting a check. And then bad things, things which are awful at the time, but which will later make amazing anecdotes. So most sex that you have in your teenage and early 20s will be in the second category, something which is terrible at the time, but which will later make an amazing anecdote when you're in the pub with your friends and they're going, "He did what? You fell off where? He said that." I remember once shouting, "Give it some welly" during sex when I was 23. I don't even know where the language came from, but we simply had to stop and both stare at the ruined sex that we had just destroyed there. So that was all wrong. So yeah, so remember this. And again, particularly if you're going into creative industries, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a broadcaster, if you want to be a blogger, unless you're going around fucking your life up quite hugely, you're not going to have anything to write about. This is my excuse for alcoholism and chaos. You need to go out there and do weird things because that's what makes the interesting stories later. If you live a calm and orderly life, you will have no material at all. Being thrown out of a pub and shouting, "This is all going to make great future material," is a wonderful way to style out being rejected from a public building. And then the other one is, it's a metaphor, a metaphor. The best things are like antique wood or pearls. Like with pearls, if you have a pearl necklace, I still don't have one yet, I'm aspiring to this, but if you have a pearl necklace, you have to wear it every day because the oil and the heat from your skin gives it luster and what makes it glow. If you leave it in a box, your pearl necklace will look shit. And it's the same with beautiful antiques. When you look at a beautiful antique piece of wood or an antique piece of furniture, the amount of times that a hand has touched it, the oil and the heat is what makes it glow and what gives it beauty, kind of things that have been polished, things that have been touched. And anything you create is like that. All the best things in the world, almost without exception, are down to a combination of time and love. Time and time again, when you things being touched, your grease, your warmth is what makes something beautiful. And time again, when you look at the very best things in the world, it's simply down to a combination of time and love. I spent a very long time thinking that, you know, inspiration or my future would come out of the sky. I would have to become magic. I would have to become so fascinating that someone would come and give me a career, or I would become a muse and someone would write a song about me. And I didn't know how you could do a thing or make a thing. And when you know that if you just work 4 times harder than anyone else. If you're ever wondering why things aren't working, just look at the hardest working person you know and go, I will work at least twice as hard as them. That is when you will start seeing results. When you don't have weekends, when you don't have evenings, you work twice as hard. And when you do it out of love. And those are the things that glow. And all the way through history, the most astonishing things, sort of like, Sergeant Pepper, Wolf Hall, David Bowie, the Book of Kells, the iPhone, Stonehenge, St. Paul's, Alan Partridge, Alexander McQueen's Couture, Derek Jarman's Garden, Glastonbury, Singing in the Rain. All of those things are just time and love. You know, it's great to not have to believe in magic anymore. That can exhaust you. Just simply graft your ass off and do something you believe. Then that will. And then the magic is that when you put time and love into something, you do become magic. You do become something else. You do start changing things. But it's just that thing of knowing simply hard work will make it all work out. And then finally, my last piece of advice is this, that remember, if you do all of these things and follow all of my advice and work your ass off and do stuff from the heart and be the loveliest person in the world with a genius product that will save the world, actually being the next step in evolution and all round more awesome than David Bowie, Beyonce, and Bill Gates, if on the day your work finally goes public and you post it up there and you release it to the world, someone tweets a picture of a weasel riding a woodpecker, you're fucked. No one will pay any attention to what you did. It's all, the entire internet is just going to be full of people going, oh my God, the weasel, the weasel, the weasel. That's it. So just simply pull it back and wait until the weasel mania just died down. So yes, these are my advices. Good luck to you all. Remember, you are the future. And the key thing is, if people are saying you can't do it, you just put that word on the end. Yet. You are the yet. Thank you very much.